History's strange, it's alien, and it won't give us what we would like to have.
Nice to have you with us for hour 3 of the program on this Tuesday morning. It is January 6th of 2026. And as always on a Tuesday, Dave Bowman is with us, has been for the whole show. But in this hour, we basically turn it over to Dave because it's Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live, as we have been going through, absence our holiday break for a couple of things, but we've been going through the Liberty 250 series, the grievances that this country, the colonies, were mounting as the time for splitting with Great Britain was coming upon us. Dave Bowman, how far are we along on this, and where are we going today, sir?
As Jefferson would write, the grievance says, he has plundered our seas, that is King George III, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. By January of 1776, we're at war. We've been at war since April, but by now everybody sort of realizes that. And in the state of Virginia, the future state of Virginia, the colony of Virginia at this point, although, Bill, this was the week that the first actual usage of the phrase United States of America was actually used. So we had already begun to think of ourselves in those terms. Virginia is an interesting place at this point because while most of the revolutionary fervor is in Boston and the Northeast, Virginia is the largest colony, and it's the most populous colony, and it's the colony that you might look at it on the surface and go, it has the closest ties really to the crown. I mean, it has the official church of Virginia is the Anglican Church. They're still taxing people to support that church. It's very British. If you've ever been to Virginia, it still kind of is in some ways. But Virginia is starting to become revolutionary. And one of the things that will push it into that revolutionary column is a guy we've already talked about, Lord Dunmore, who is the royal governor of Virginia, and he will do more really to unite the entire country against England and the king than really anybody else. And it's weird that nobody even talks about him.
I take it sure this is not intentional on his part.
Oh, it's very intentional. Although he doesn't look at it as he's trying to unite them.
Right.
But what he does is very intentional. And I'm not even sure, I'm trying to recall if Ken Burns even brought him up, but he might have. I just don't remember it. The bottom line is what he will do ultimately is going to really unite the colonies. Now, let's be frank, it's not for a good reason, but it does accomplish the purpose of uniting the colonies. But by this point in 1776, Lord Dunmore, first week in January of 1776, Lord Dunmore has actually evacuated the capital at Williamsburg. Remember when the House of Burgesses walked out and went down to the bar and kept governing? He has decided to leave. He's actually living in a ship off the coast of Virginia because it's the only place he's really safe. And he is plotting. And he does something that is, we're going to get into much deeper downstream, but he issues what's known as Dunmore's Proclamation. In Virginia, which is a slave-holding colony, he issues a proclamation that any slave who runs away and joins his troops will be given their freedom. And of course, this pushes Virginia over the edge. It pushes Virginia into the revolutionary column. It also it has the same effect in South Carolina, North Carolina, to a lesser degree, Georgia. They see this as an attack on their way of life, much as we will see the same kind of attitude 60 years, 70 years later. This is what drives Virginia into that column. Lord Dunmore actually gets a response. He actually gets slaves to run away from their masters, and he puts them into what is known as an Ethiopian regiment. That's what he calls it, which is made up of former slaves, African Americans, who then he is going to Well, as he's sitting in his ship off the coast of Norfolk, he's going to use these people to try and smash the rebellion once and for all.
And we'll see where it goes when we continue in just 1 minute. Make it 45 seconds on Bill Mick Live. I find it interesting, Dave, that Dunmore goes offshore, establishes basically his headquarters there, and then recruits slaves that he claims he's going to free into fighting for him.
Yeah, it's an
good gig if you can get it.
It's an interesting idea, but the message that it sends is not the one he intended. Now, again, we're not here to debate the slavery issue, but it is what unites in many ways, particularly the southern colonies against the king in this matter. Now let's jump back a little bit. Let's go back to June of last year, 1775, during the Battle of Bunker Hill and the siege of Boston. The British troops determined that it's militarily necessity, but it's a bad political move. It really looks bad. Boston in that era was actually made up of a couple of little towns, Boston and a place called Charleston, which used to be out on its own little peninsula. Today it's not. But the British decide that in order to keep the rebels, us, from doing whatever it is that we needed to do, they decide to burn Charleston to the ground. Now, Charleston is a civilian city, but they just put the torch to it and burn it. Gone. That's bad enough. It makes a bunch of people homeless. It makes a bunch of people, upset. Businesses are lost, that sort of thing. A few weeks later, in a place called Stonington, the British fleet shows up. Now, we have this policy now that gets put into effect in the British fleet where they're going to just start attacking coastal towns. And in doing so, punish, quote unquote, the Americans for their resistance. This starts in a place called Stonington in August of 1775. It damages part of the town, doesn't result in total destruction, but it does indicate that fear and fire are becoming the main British ideas for how they're going to do this. They believe that an overwhelming display of force would force obedience, but they misread their audience. Stonington was bad enough. Then you got a place called Bristol, Connecticut, where the British forces again go in. They bombard things. Actually, it's in Rhode Island, sorry. It's part of this broader pattern, this broader idea that the British have come up with to do this. And it's not working as well as they'd hoped that it would work because, well, the British naval people, in the words of at least one British officer, just aren't being aggressive enough. They're doing it, but they're not doing it like they really need to do it, which is what leads to a place called Falmouth, Massachusetts, which today is Portland, Maine. When they show up at Falmouth, the guy that's now in charge of the British Navy at this point says, I'm here to destroy your town. He sends a delegation in and says, look, I'm here to destroy your town. You can surrender all your arms and powder to me, and maybe I'll leave you alone, but you need to make an instant decision. The town leaders of Falmouth, they don't want to do that, and they basically say no. And so the city of Falmouth, Maine, at that point, Falmouth, Massachusetts, Portland, Maine, is literally shelled into oblivion. I mean, it is just utterly destroyed. And if you know anything about the area, the Portsmouth, Maine, is a major port city. And it's, even to this day, it's one of our shipyards. It had to be rebuilt entirely. But this idea of using the Navy to bombard these coastal cities and burning these towns to the ground, it's just pure terrorism. That's all it is. There's no military necessity to this. It's just attacking the civilian population to try to force them to stop the rebellion. By the time we get to the Christmas, New Year's break, I guess, in Virginia, Lord Dunmore has gathered his Ethiopian regiment, and he has decided that he is going to just literally using these former slaves and what little militia he has decided that he is going to end this rebellion entirely in the entire country. He has decided he's going to end it right here, right now. I don't know what makes him think that. I don't know what his mindset is, that he just doesn't seem to understand that, number one, this is bigger than just Virginia. But number two, by recruiting escaped slaves, you have really hit the root nerve of Southern unity here. Again, we're not here to debate the slavery issue, but this is an issue that you can understand is going to unite these colonies against the king, especially since they blame the king anyway for bringing slaves in to start with. Lord Dunmore decides Norfolk, the biggest harbor in America, is the target. This is where we're going to settle this. So he sets off with his Ethiopian regiment. He is going to take Norfolk, and he is going to take the rebel army, and this will be the end of all ends. Of course, little spoiler alert here, doesn't quite work out that way.
And we lay it out for you as Dave Does History continues on Bill Mick Live. We're back in moments right here on 92.7 FM WMMB.
This is Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live.
And we've got links to Dave Bowman, his work. It's on the show page today at BillMick.com. Title of the show page, Change Takes Time, Protests Are Instant. You'll have to catch those in our podcast, top of the page at BillMick.com if you weren't with us for the rest of the show. But those links to Dave and his shows, Dave Does History link right there on the show page this morning. So you can always catch up with Dave and What the Frock and Dave Does History through all of that. And Dave does a history podcast. If it's not every day, it's almost every day. And I spent some time over the holidays catching up with a bunch of those, Dave. They're very well done. They're not that long. And some interesting information that we probably don't have.
Yeah, I try to keep them to 4 minutes just to get it out there. And it's something you can think about.
Makes you do some thinking and gives you an opportunity to think about aspects of history like he does here with us every Tuesday that you don't necessarily get to see or hear in any history class anywhere. Speaking of, we're talking about the lead up to the revolution, and we are in the midst of it, and Virginia in focus. Dave, I'll let you get back to it.
Yeah, I think the revolution's already started. And Lord Dunmore, who's sitting in a ship off Norfolk, is watching what's happened. Now, I spent about 40% of my Navy career in the Norfolk area, Virginia Beach. It's a good area. I liked it. And it's a lot of history there. But a lot of this history isn't really discussed. Norfolk, at this point, the largest port in Virginia. It's the most important city in Virginia, even more important than the capital at Williamsburg. The Patriots managed to occupy the city of Norfolk. And there's a lot of tension in the city because there are folks who are not convinced. Again, Virginia at this point hasn't quite been pushed into that column. There's merchants who need, they need trade to keep feeding their families. But the Patriots have occupied the town, and Lord Dunmore, sitting off Norfolk, sees this. And what he sees is not, it's not prevention. It's not keeping the British out. It's a provocation. And he decides that this is time to take action. So on January 1st, 1776, he chooses violence. He chooses force. He orders his ships to open fire on Norfolk. No warning shots. These are not, hey, listen up or else. This is not a demonstration. It is a flat-out, foul-mouthed type bombardment of the city and port of Norfolk. Shells are tearing into the waterfront. Of course, they're heated shells, so fires break out almost immediately. And Norfolk, as most towns are in 1776, is a town that's built primarily of wood and tar and rope. It's close. It's stacked closely along the docks. And once the flames start, there's no way to control it. Wind is carrying the fire from building to building. warehouses and all the stuff that's in them and feeding it, and everything starts to go up, including people's homes. Well, people have to run because they got to get away from this. Families flee inland. They carry what they can. Goods are abandoned. Animals break loose. And people who can't escape watch from the shorelines as their livelihoods collapsed into sparks and rubble. And at that point, the Patriots make a grim decision. If Norfolk is already burning, we can't allow it to fall back into British hands. And so the Patriot side sees what Norfolk has become, sees what the British have done to it, but are determined that since it's not going to be any value to us, we cannot allow them to retake this. And so the Patriots, our side, lights what's left of Norfolk on fire. Can't be allowed to fall back into British hands. And so it is that Norfolk, started by the British, finished by us, is burnt to the ground.
We pick it up in 1 minute on WMMB. So Dunmore starts the destruction of Norfolk, Dave, and when they see that it's going to be unsalvageable, the Patriots say, well, you think you did it, we're going to finish it off for you, so there's nothing here.
And that's really the problem. Historians are going to argue about the morality of all this, who's responsible for it, who lit which fire, which buildings burned first, so all that kind of stuff. But none of that really matters to the people who are standing there watching their town burn. Hundreds of buildings are destroyed because the British fired first. Everything that follows flows from that fact. The British fired first. Which buildings burned, which side crossed the final moral line, doesn't really matter that much. Hundreds of buildings are destroyed, people are displaced, and Virginia's most important port ceases to function as a city. I mean, it's not going to work. Commerce collapsed overnight, families scattered to the countryside, and what had been the center of trade in Virginia becomes a very cautionary tale. This is where the grievances that we list in the Declaration of Independence become reality, not just abstract. Ravaged our coasts. He has ravaged our coasts. Well, Norfolk is a coastal town. He has burnt our towns. Norfolk, one of those towns. These are not words, they're not just slogans. These are eyewitness testimony. But more importantly, reconciliation, which at that point was still discussed. It wasn't realistic, but there were those who still wanted it, cannot survive these kinds of bombardments. Compromises do not rise from ashes. And whatever hope remained that the British Empire, would pull back, restrain itself, or seek peace on equal terms, was burnt down in the city of Norfolk. It also proved to be something else decisive. If the British authorities require the destruction of colonial cities, there's literally nothing left to reconcile with. The fire answers that question, and petitions couldn't. And that's really the focal point of what Jefferson is saying. He has ravaged our cities. He has burned them. He has destroyed the lives of our people. And he did it through his actors, Lord Dunmore. He's done it on purpose. It was arguably unnecessary, militarily unnecessary. If Dunmore had the troops, then he could have just occupied the town and been fine, right? But he chose not to do that, just as Lieutenant what's-his-name, and I've forgotten his name now, decided to do that at Falmouth. We're just going to burn the thing to the ground, and that'll send the message that we want sent, which is you do what we want you to do or else, which, of course, is not going to lead to much of a reconciliation. It's not going to lead to a restoration, and it's certainly not going to lead to peace. What it's going to lead to is a full-on declaration of independence, saying we no longer need you, we no longer want you, and we're not going to be part of this anymore because you people are terrorists. And that's exactly the feeling that Jefferson wants you to get when he writes those words. These people are insane, lunatic terrorists who would rather burn down a town than talk to you.
That is very telling. We wrap it up. Take your calls when we continue with Dave Does History in moments on WMMB.
Call Bill now, 321-768-1240.
Glad you're with us for Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live. Dave Bowman spending these Tuesdays with us, and this hour devoted to probably learning history in a way we haven't, and I really appreciate that and enjoy it every Tuesday when Dave is with us here. So, Dave, I was asking you during the break, did Lord Dunmore, was there any coordination between he and the British and any British authority, any British military commanders or directives from the king that our strategy is going to be slash and burn these cities?
There was none of that in the traditional sense that we would think of today. Command control didn't exist in those forms. There is a broad policy. You're the governor, you're the royal governor, and it's your job to enforce British policies and British rules and British rule. The problem is that let's say that Dunmore wanted to ask the king or Parliament or the Privy Council, should I do this? Well, it's 1775, 1776, so he's got to write a letter. He's got to find a ship that's going to England, and November, not really the time to be crossing the Atlantic, by the way.
Right. Yeah.
Then he's got to send this letter all the way across the Atlantic, which could take somewhere that time of year, somewhere between 6 and 10 weeks.
Wow.
To get to London. Then you've got to deal with the London, the parliamentary bureaucracy to debate whether the policy was, should we do this, should we not do this, which is already going on, by the way. There's a lot of that debate already happening about what the grand strategy is going to be for the war, and it's dividing the cabinet already. So let's say that letter gets there, they have to make their decision, then they have to get it back to him, which could take 12 weeks going the other way this time of year, and who knows what the decision would be at that point. I don't know what the king would have said. I suspect that the king would have said, yeah, burn the cities. He certainly didn't object to it when he learned about it, so there you go.
That's a little telling, yeah.
Yeah, neither did the king object to the idea of enlisting runaway slaves. The king was probably, I guess the best way to describe him, a little bit anti-slavery. By this point, Britain was moving that direction anyway, so it wouldn't have surprised me. But this use of the slaves would be important. Dunmore, by the way, had enlisted this Ethiopian regiment, and a month before he burned Norfolk, he tried to lead them in combat. He tried to take his troops, his militia, into combat, and it did not go well. They got their butts kicked at the Battle of Great Bridge, which is probably why he's so hell-bent on revenge by burning Norfolk, because he doesn't really have any options left at this point. He doesn't have any troops left. His slave thing didn't go as well as he had hoped. And there you go. It's important to keep in mind, though, that the effect, the social contagion, if you will, that his proclamation had was far more reaching than anything else that he did. This proclamation was very narrow. It didn't abolish slavery. It was only limited to slaves who were held by rebels. So if you were a slave and you tried to run away from a loyalist, you got set back. But if you belonged to someone who was a patriot, we'll take you, but you must serve in our military. Well, of course, they didn't have training. They didn't have a lot of equipment, and the way they got essentially sacrificed and abused at Great Bridge isn't going to inflict a great deal of confidence going forward. Yeah, I really want to sign up to be gristmill here. But For the enslaved people, the message was unmistakable. Freedom, however conditional, was suddenly imaginable. Risky, uncertain, cruelly selective, but real enough to act upon. Thousands had fled their plantations and farms and followed towards the British line. For the slaveholders in Virginia, the reaction was immediate and was visceral. This was not simply a military threat. This is existential. One of the great threats, one of the great fears of the Southern colonists well into the 1860s is a slave uprising. Dunmore isn't threatening defeat. He's threatening social collapse. Property, labor, family structures, hierarchy, all of that has just been pulled out from underneath them. And the governor had shown a willingness to turn the most volatile element of colonial society into a weapon that he could use against them. This is going to resonate all up and down the coast, even in the northern states where slavery is not necessarily an issue. They see this as an opportunity to say to the southern states, see, your cause is our cause. Virginia's already saying that. Georgia's being a little recalcitrant. South Carolina gets on board. This is a moment when British policy crosses a line which cannot be uncrossed. Not because slavery was sacred, but because social order was. Dunmore had demonstrated that the empire, the British Empire, would tear apart that colonial society, even if it meant retaining control. No custom too old, no stability too important, nothing is off limits. Fear has become our policy. And of course, this results in escalation. It results in all kinds of problems. And, by the way, it means that Lord Dunmore, who has put this policy into place and burns these cities, disease follows, smallpox, fever. They're unprepared for the humanitarian crisis that this whole thing caused. They're unprepared for what happens when you displace an entire population by burning their cities and taking away their social order. Thousands who fled for freedom found sickness instead. Many died. Others were later captured, sold, or just abandoned when the British finally withdraw. Dunmore had promised liberation. He delivers as chaos. And this is the conclusion that the colonists draw. This is not a government trying to restore order anymore. This is a government willing to destroy everything to win.
So, Dave, yes, there was destruction, but what I'm reading into this and what I'm seeing is even if the destruction was survivable and there were encampments to be had or things to do, this was their society being turned upside down on them. Their society was not going to exist as they knew it, and Dunmore was there to see that that was the case.
So, exactly. And when Jefferson sits down to write those words, he doesn't have to invent a villain. He's recalling this sequence of events. He is reminding Virginians of what they've already lived through. He doesn't need to make up British cruelty. He remembers it, and so do the men who are standing around him. His grievance reads, he has plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. It's not rhetoric that he's just shaping for effect. It's actually compression. An entire winter reduced to a sentence because everybody in that room already knows the story. They know about ships stopping commerce and turning harbors into checkpoints. They know about governors ruling from cannon decks instead of from the Capitol. They know about Norfolk. They also know about something a little quieter and a little more decisive. They know that reconciliation cannot survive fire. Norfolk was not the first town burned, nor will it be the last. But it is the moment when hope for restraint finally collapses. It proves that British authority, when challenged, answers with destruction rather than accommodation. And once that's clear, the remaining arguments are no longer philosophical. Now they're logistical. How do you live under a government that treats cities as expendable? And that's where Dunmore matters the most, not as a villain per se, but as a catalyst. He did not set out to ignite the revolution. He actually believed that he was trying to suppress it. He believed that pressure would restore obedience. He believed that fear would produce stability. History has little patience for such beliefs.
It's interesting to me, and as you've reminded us before in our Liberty 250 series, the idea of this Declaration of Independence was to not just lay out grievances, but to lay out a legal case with evidence. This is what has occurred, and this is why what you're doing is wrong. And the king knew it when he read it, I would assume. He knew the events that had occurred. So it's a document to say, here are the charges against you. How can you fight this?
I'm not necessarily convinced that King George III, he never read the Olive Branch Petition. I'm not convinced that he read the Declaration of Independence. He may have had it explained to him. He may have. He was a very literate man. And obviously he saw things from a different side. But at the same time, Jefferson has laid out this case, and he's laid it out really for the entire world. That's what he says in the preamble. This is, let facts be shown to the world. And it's unarguable. What has happened here, what Dunmore has done, what the British Navy has done, what the troops did in Charleston, it's all destruction. It's all intimidation. None of this is the reconciliation that the British supposedly are trying to, they keep saying. And that's the argument from history. Even today you'll read, well, maybe the rebels went too far. But your response was destruction. And once you cross that line, you've lost the moral argument.
Yeah, that's very true. As Norfolk eventually became a port again, and it's going to be some time before that all comes together. What are we looking at as we continue to move into next week and the weeks beyond, as we're looking at the creation of this declaration?
Nothing happens in a vacuum. And so even as Norfolk is burning, Washington's troops are in winter quarters. Congress is debating things. There is a man who is sitting, and we've talked about him before, there is a man who is sitting in a tent with a pencil and some paper. He wasn't born here. He emigrated here. But he has some ideas, and he is writing those ideas down. And this coming week in 1776, he will publish one of those things that he is writing down. And that thing, that little pamphlet that he writes, will go on to not only become the best-selling book in American history, but it will be the book, the pamphlet, that absolutely ignites everyone on board with the revolution.
You had to use the word ignite after we talked burning down towns today, didn't you? Dave, always appreciated. Job well done.
Check out more stories from history at davedoeshistory.org.